Hello, I'm James, and welcome to a Jonesing for Film franchise review. This week I will be reviewing the Matrix trilogy. So first up is 1999's The Matrix. Keanu Reeves stars as Neo, a computer hacker who learns that the world he lives in is a computerized dream world called the Matrix, which was designed by machines so they can use humans as batteries. Neo is recruited by a man named Morpheus to help fight in the war against the machines. Now there's a lot more to the story, but that's the basic premise without getting too spoilerish. And what a story it is! This isn't something the writers slapped together in one weekend. You can tell a lot of time was put into making this story as detailed as possible. This is one of those films you need to watch a couple of times to fully grasp everything that's going on. Another thing that works for the film is the way it's shot. It has a very gritty tone. When characters are in the real world, it's a wasteland, so therefore things are very dark and dreary. And when the characters are in the Matrix, the colors for the most part are very dull, adding to the fake feel the world has. Another thing I like is Hugo Weaving as Agent Smith. Do I really need to say anything else? This guy is a fantastic actor and makes a great villain. But when this movie is brought up in conversation, the thing that everyone talks about mostly is the action. This film was a game changer for action movies. Most action movies these days owe a lot to this film. The usage of slow motion had never been as extensive until this movie came out. And all the praise that this movie gets for its action is well deserving. The choreography is very fluid and fast, and the lobby shootout is one of my all-time favorite shootouts. But the movie isn't perfect. There are a few flaws. For starters, the acting is mediocre aside from Hugo Weaving and Lawrence Fishburne, who plays Morpheus. I don't hate Keanu Reeves like most people seem to, but I will admit that he can be pretty deadpan at times. And I think the reason for the mediocre acting is that the characters aren't really deep. They're just kind of there to move the story along. I don't feel an emotional attachment with these characters at all. And even though the story is interesting, it does feel very drawn out. It really does slow the pace a bit. I mean, yeah, it is over 2 hours long, but it feels like it's over 2.5 hours, maybe even pushing 3 hours. So overall, I give The Matrix an excellent. Despite its flaws, it still is a solid sci-fi film. Next up is The Matrix Reloaded from 2003. So the film takes place a few months after the first film. The humans have discovered that an army of machines is drilling its way to Zion, the last human city in the real world. Now Neo, Trinity, and Morpheus must locate a program known as the Keymaker who will show them the door to Zion's survival. To make matters worse, Agent Smith has returned and found a way to copy himself, thus creating an army of Smiths. Now the first thing I have to talk about this one is the action. To me, it's the best action in the series. The first film may have had my favorite shootout, and the war and revolutions may be exciting, but to me, the best action overall is in this film. There's just so much of it. There's like 4 or 5 major action set pieces here, and they are all entertaining. Okay, so now that I've geeked out over the action, let's talk about the rest of the movie. First, I love how the creators have expanded these worlds. I mean, with The Matrix, they've added all these different programs as well as insight to what some programs do. I particularly like this line.
The program was written to watch over the trees and the wind, sunrise and sunset. That program's running all over the place.
I just love how they've put all this detail into this world. And then in the real world, they've brought in Zion, the last human city, and we see how humans outside of the Matrix live. And again, I have to show some love to Hugo Weaving. The monologue he has before the Neo vs. Smith clones fight is one of the best monologues ever, in my opinion. Another plus is the pacing. As I said earlier, the first film was kind of slow and felt drawn out. Here they found a nice medium between detailing the story and keeping the film moving at a nice pace. Now this next point is both a pro and a con. The main story is really complex. This is a pro because I do like having to think about a plot point I just experienced. But at the same time, there's a lot to comprehend. So on that note, let's dive into what I didn't like about the movie. First, once again, the characters are still pretty shallow. They do try for some depth with a romance between Neo and Trinity, but it's a basic romance. There's nothing special about it. And again, the acting is average. But probably my biggest complaint about the film is near the beginning there's this rave party thing in Zion that had no real business being in the film. It was like the purest definition of a filler scene. My final point on this movie is neither a pro or a con, just something I feel like sharing. I finally understand the architect scene in this movie, despite some of the complex words used. But I'm positive some of those words were made up just for this movie. There were just some words that didn't seem real. Why do I feel like bringing this up? Because that scene was the most confusing scene I had ever seen in a movie. And so far, nothing has ever topped it. So my final verdict on The Matrix Reloaded is superb. I know a lot of people probably disagree with me, but to me, it's my favorite of the series. Finally, we come to The Matrix Revolutions, also from 2003, as it was shot back-to-back with Matrix Reloaded. Basically, what's going on in this film is Smith has taken over the Matrix, the machines are about to enter Zion, Neo heads to the Machine City to confront the lead machine, and Hugo Weaving is still a badass. Now, there's not much new to say here. My main issues with the last two films are present here, so I'm not going to bother mentioning them. There is one new issue I have, but I'll get to that in a second. I'm going to keep the pattern and talk about the good first. First point is something that doesn't happen too often in movies. Gloria Foster, the woman who played the Oracle in the first two films, sadly passed away before her scenes could be filmed for this movie. The Oracle is a big part of this film, so naturally the character was recast. Now, in most movies, when a character is recast, nobody really acknowledges the fact the character looks different. I mean, most movies don't even throw in a little joke like, hey, did you do something with your hair? You look different. So the thing I love about this movie is the moment the main characters see the Oracle, they're like, who are you? And they give an explanation to why the Oracle looks different. I love that! Another thing I like about this film is the war against the machines. It's much more than, there's a lot of explosions! No, there's more to it for me. First thing, the battle mechs the humans use are awesome. I want one. I also like the battle tactics the machines have. Instead of, Robot A goes left and attacks something and then Robot B goes right, these things cluster together and form like hand shapes and just mow stuff down. These things are freaking scary. And finally, the action is really intense. This point goes for all three films. The Wachowskis know how to effectively shoot action scenes. Now for that issue I mentioned earlier. The ending. It's slightly confusing and it kind of falls flat. The whole film is the conclusion to the story, and up until the last 10 minutes, it feels like a story like this should be ending. And then they lose it. I have no other way of explaining it. It's just weak. So overall, The Matrix Revolution gets an excellent. The movie was definitely heading in the right path to be a fitting conclusion, but that last 10 minutes really brings the movie down for me. So that's my take on the Matrix franchise. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe. Also, don't forget to visit me on Facebook and check out my blog. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next review.